button. There we go. Okay, everybody. I hope everybody's had a fantastic start to the week. No doubt. I'm sure you're really looking forward to this week in particular. It doesn't even really count, right? Because it's like such a short week. In any event, we have the pearls of wisdom up on the screen. Too much going on here. I hope that your eyes were able to enjoy this. I'm going to let this just speak for itself. Let's just dive right into our announcements. Alrighty, so first and foremost, tomorrow we will have a tutorial. In fact, it is our last tutorial. It's kind of like, that's sad. It's the last one. In any event, we're going to do a Unit 5 boot camp. So although it's still maybe a little bit on the early side, actually, it's okay. But I really want to stress a lot of that labor relations stuff that we recently wrapped up. That's where I put a lot of emphasis into the boot camp. But nonetheless, I think it is still a really, really great session. Good time had by all, and will be helpful and resourceful in the future. I am thrilled to share with you. It has been posted to the Hive in a couple of places as well. It has been emailed to you because of the timing of it all. But tomorrow evening, hopefully you are able to join at 7 o'clock Eastern time. I'm going to be introducing you, even if it's by means of the recording, but I'm going to be introducing you to somebody who's become a really good friend of mine. Her name is Danielle. Danielle was part of prior to you guys, part of a recent class or group that I was helping prepare for the exams. We had actually just wrapped up just moments, like a week or two before our group began in August. So anyhow, point being, she had just tested, not even a month ago. She took her PHR exam. Fortunately, she was successful, but regardless of the outcome, it was still an amazing experience. And she is actually going to be sitting in about a month for the SHRM CP exam. So not only does she have testing experience at exhaustion, but she'll probably also have some insight, to share with everybody. In any event, I have asked her if she would be so kind to come and speak to you guys and allow you guys to pick her brains, because her experience, both preparations as well as testing, is so timely that I just thought, it'd be nice to hear another source. So I'm glad you're happy. So anyhow, so that's happening tomorrow night. Now, because we do have the Coaches Corner session, again, if you're in the habit of attending, that's going to be still held at the regular time at 8 o'clock Eastern. So we're going to try to keep this to about 30 minutes, plus or minus, depends on what you need. If you are not able to attend, no problem. The session will be recorded. And of course, if you have any questions, I'm happy to put you in touch with her if there are questions maybe I can't answer. But she's amazing. She's so forthcoming. She's so friendly and approachable that I know she just wants to help other people be successful. Because I'll be honest, she had that kind of help. So, what goes around comes around. Anyhow, so that's happening tomorrow. The link to join, again, has been shared in those two places in the Hive. One is in the community chat in the Buzz. Another is an event that I created with a link in lesson number 28. But as well, I emailed you the link and all the information. So hopefully it's all at your fingertips. And if you didn't already know this, do me a favor, do yourself a favor. Don't show up on Thursday. No one's going to be here. You just go and enjoy your turkey and your family and your friends. So there will be no class this Thursday. We'll get back right on track next Monday, that being December the 2nd. And on that note, guys, I wish everybody a very happy and healthy, safe, enjoyable, relaxing Thanksgiving. I wish for everybody, all the best always, and more importantly, to find yourself some really good deals online when you're shopping. Okay, so did you say Danielle is the coach? No, Danielle will be our special guest speaker at 7 o'clock, but we are going to wrap up so that anybody and everybody can head on over to the Coaches Corner, which will be held at 8 o'clock. That is a good question. I forget off the top of my head. I have to double check my list, and that is going to be posted and emailed out actually once we finish our class tonight. So sorry, I don't remember. I'll be honest. Sorry. Alrighty, guys. So let's dive right in. You'll be happy to know, well, you already know, but you'll be happy to be reminded that all of this labor relations stuff is pretty much behind us. I'll be honest. Yeah, I think once today, something might come up, but it doesn't really count. And it's pretty gentle, so I think you'll be okay with it. We're now going to go back into talking about all the labor relations stuff. No, not labor relations, employee relations. So we're going to start talking about discipline systems. So what I want to do in this section is really just take a look at administrative justice, what types of punishment there are, what are disciplines, what is all the stigma around it. So first and foremost, let's talk about a key concept. It's not even per se a buzzword, but it is a concept that you see in the top half of page 121. Oh, by the way, sorry, everybody head on over to page 121 if you're not already there, please. You'll see in the third paragraph from the top, justified all the way over to the right, very first line, this concept called hot stove. Often, it is this concept, if you will, in this system behind this concept that a lot of organizations like to put in place. So what is the hot stove? I want you to imagine this. Imagine an electric stove, one of those really cool, modern, sleek glass cooktops, not coil, not gas. And to that respect, I want you to imagine when an element is turned on, or maybe it's just about to cool down because it was on until recently, but when an element is hot, there is usually like an icon on that stovetop to indicate it's still hot. Don't touch it. You're not going to like what happens if you do. Well, if somebody chooses not to pay attention to that or to disregard it maybe intentionally, they choose the consequences. They're going to get burned. Not a pretty picture. But that's what this concept is basically saying. So when a lot of organizations, especially when they have like a systematic disciplinary approach in place, when these organizations administer punishment, it's based on the hot stove. And that's really where progressive discipline comes in. You're going to get a warning. If you choose to disregard that warning, then you better be prepared. You're going to be punished. In this case, you're going to get burned. Let's take a look at different types of consequences. There are, as you can see, and then we make our way over towards page 122 now, but there are natural consequences. Maybe nothing that we could have planned, maybe something that we were kind of forewarned about, maybe something we could have been proactive to avoid, but this is just natural. It's just, if you will, the way that the cookie crumbles. Think of the environment. If we, as society, as members of the planet, avoid all the warning signs, and we do not recycle, and we do not take, all of our, I guess, better choices or better actions, then the natural consequence will be we, our children, our children's children, and those children, we're going to suffer from a depleting ozone. Now, I'm not an environmentalist, so forgive me if I'm kind of not talking, in circles, but I do know this much. Things aren't going too well. You can also think of it as just human behavior. It's natural that, I guess when one is rude to another, for example, they're going to push them away. Those are natural consequences. But then we have logical consequences, where really the punishment should fit the crime. There needs to be a relationship, because otherwise you've deterred, if you will, the individual from perhaps choosing a little bit wiser, like, making smarter choices. In fact, all you've done probably is really drive a very ineffective kind of outcome. Let me give you a really wild, crazy example. Tonight is going to be example night. Now, I'm trying to use my time wisely because I know exactly, what I've got in store for everybody, but I like this example. I'm going back, gosh, it must be like 7 years ago. But in any event, my eldest daughter, she has a gift to gab. Now, the jury's still out. We don't know where she got this from, but the child just doesn't stop talking. It has just carried on with her from grade school through to high school. Anyhow, I don't know why, but my husband blames it on me. I think he's wrong. I remember when she was in grade 5, the teacher brought to our attention on more than one occasion, truth be told, that she doesn't make the smartest choices. She talks a lot during class, like during the lesson, and it's disruptive. Okay, so she was warned. We warned her. okay, the child just can't resist. Like, she has no self-discipline. Anyhow. And rightfully so, I guess the teacher had it. And so the teacher told her, that's it, you're done. We're now going to the library. You're not coming with us. That's your punishment. So, rhetorical question to you, but I ask you, do you think that that punishment fit the crime? Just food for thought, but I'm going to continue. This is actually what happened. My daughter came home probably just as happy as could be because she didn't go to the library. So she tells me what happened, and I was livid. I wasn't livid that she was punished. I was livid that her right, it's not a privilege, that's just my opinion, but her right to go to the library was taken away from her. But aside from that, I'm an evil parent, and I had always, when kids were young and they listened to me, I had always asked them, when you go to the library, I want you to bring home that book, and you're going to do a book report for me. So here my daughter's thinking, I didn't get to go to the library, can't do a book report for mom. Oh, well. So she was happy. And also, the library is a quiet, disciplined environment. It is a no tolerance kind of environment. Why would you take a chatty Cathy away from needing that discipline? So here she was thinking, great, I don't need to go to an environment that frankly, really, I'm not a good fit with. So my argument to the teacher was, punish the child. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of that. But the punishment didn't fit the crime. In fact, all it did was inspire her to keep doing this misbehavior because she got out of something she doesn't like. What I think you should have done was, if clearly she's getting schooling time mixed up with social time, then when it's time for recess or lunch break or whatever, you make sure she goes to the office and that's when she does her work until she gets those two straight. So there's the drama, whether you guys agree or disagree anyhow. I hope you don't think badly of me, but be that as it may. Logical consequences basically mean the punishment needs to be logical. The punishment should fit the crime, or it's not correcting the misbehavior. In fact, there is what is called the contrived consequences. If a punishment is unrelated to the misbehavior, it's not effective. And in that case, don't do anything. Oh, let's see. We'll see. I want her to be a lawyer. She's very good at arguing with me, that's for sure. Okay, so what you see here on your screen, really I've just taken a snapshot of what otherwise is on page 125. You have this, of course, at your fingertips. Now you have it in front of your eyeballs as well, but it shows various different types of approaches, if you will, to discipline. So there's going to be negative outcomes, there's going to be positive. Again, as long as there's meaning behind the madness, I think that is very helpful. But I wanted to bring this to your attention just to, sink your teeth into. Let's talk about progressive discipline. Just take a moment and ask yourself as we flip over to page 126, what is my company's approach to disciplining? And if you're not sure, hey, there's a project for you for tomorrow. Maybe it's something that needs to be ironed out and created. Different conversation for a different time. And if you're still kind of struggling, maybe think about a formal organization. But anyhow, progressive discipline is really just showing that the intensity, of course, of the disciplinary action is going to increase as the same offense is repeated. I remember when I used to work in retail, we had really 4 different steps. Now I know, there's 5 here, and this is, if you will, industry standard, air quote. I realize your company might take a different approach. An example I wanted to give you definitely takes a different approach, but the concept is the same. So often we're going to see a verbal warning, which is basically hot stove. I'm just telling you, you got your warning. If this happens again, you're not going to like what's going to happen. I have to get serious. Now, either way, shape, or form, that warning should be documented. Obviously by the manager in this case, which had administered the warning. Should that offense be repeated, and that's the operative word here, repeated, then there will be a verbal reprimand. So, you know what, I need to send you home early. Or I'm sorry, but there's going to be, I don't know, an on-the-job suspension or something to that respect. Again, documented. But because it's verbal, often we don't have the employee who's being disciplined sign off. They can, but it's not too common. Should it be repeated again? We're going to see a written reprimand. Every party involved needs to sign off on this, like understanding as well that if again it is repeated, what will those consequences be? There may be suspension and ultimately discharge. But again, this should all be laid out in the company P&P, because to the employees, in their defense, if they don't know, then we can't really hold them accountable. We continue to proceed. Let's take a look over onto page 129. Oh, can I ask you guys a question? Can everybody hear me okay? I just got a pop-up saying that my audio quality may be compromised. Yeah, you're okay? That's funny. Okay, I'll ignore it. I'm being asked, what is PMP? I'm sorry, where did you say? Where did you see PMP? Is it in one of my slides? Oh, a P&P. I'm sorry, Policy and Procedure Manual. Okay, some people are saying that I am kind of coming in and out a little bit funny. Hold on tight, okay? Let me just test something. I apologize, guys. Okay, we're just going to run a very quick test to make sure everything is cooperating. Okay, I hope that that has helped and that will make the sound quality a little bit better. Let me know if it's terribly inconvenient or funny, for lack of a better word. Join me over onto page 129, and we're going to continue the conversation as well over onto page 130, Administrative Justice. So we've seen how this has evolved a lot over time, and it is generally accepted. Particularly important, truth be told, in collective agreements and otherwise. But here are the two key buzzwords. First and foremost, we have due process. That being, any disciplinary action should follow a procedure, and it is a generally accepted, known, understood procedure. And this protects people from being treated badly. This is interesting because I grew up as a child, truthfully, being told that a deterrent, maybe not a consequence per se, but certainly a deterrent will be put in place before any wrongdoing can even take place. And the expression, anyways, maybe it's just, from my immigrant parents kind of, like their place in Europe, their mother tongue, but what was it? Something to the effect of, there's something like, there's no point in getting mad at you after the milk is spilt. The damage is already done. So I'm going to yell at you before you even spill it so you don't spill it. So due process also takes into consideration that kind of a concept. But really, we're not going to go and discipline somebody until, frankly, they did something wrong to be disciplined. So one is definitely proactive, one is reactive. But then there is just cause. Just cause is, of course, a disciplinary action that should be taken for good and sufficient reason. These two go hand in hand. Let me give you an example. A long time ago, all my stories start with a long time ago, right? Like I age myself every single lesson. But a long time ago, when I had been promoted to being a manager at the Gap, it was a really big ordeal. I had been with the company for 7, 8 years. So moving into a management position, it was exciting, but it was quite the transition, especially amongst my peers. Here I had friends, and all of a sudden, they were my direct reports. It got uncomfortable for everybody a little bit. Anyhow, so one of my friends, now employee, if you will, she started to be perpetually late. And although I probably didn't pay attention because it really wasn't my business, I wasn't her manager, but I didn't notice her being late before. And so I started to think, is she taking advantage of me? Well, anybody who's ever worked retail or any type of capacity where, you're punching a time clock and time is very sensitive because, one person showing up means that the next person can go on lunch or can go home. It's very much so a dependent relationship. I wasn't okay with anybody ever being late. I don't really like tardiness, generally speaking, but anyhow. So she was being late and, it was awkward again. She's my friend. Now all of a sudden I'm a manager. I kind of dance around issues. And then again, I didn't say anything. And then again, and I'm like, okay, got to enact the progressive discipline. I went through the motions. I did the verbal, warning, and then it became a written, then it became a second written, and really on the third repeated offense, it was supposed to warrant final termination. Well, it was only upon the I guess it would be the fourth offense, really what would lead to termination, that I finally apply due process, which was giving really the accused an opportunity to defend themselves. And I had said to her, I'm like, her name was Flory. I'm like, Flory, listen, sorry, what's going on? Like, why are you walking all over me? This isn't like you. Like, come on, talk to me. And at that, and I hadn't asked her before, and note to self, I should have, because she was trusting enough to tell me why she was late. And it wasn't because she slept in, and it wasn't because she was walking all over me like I had jumped to conclusions, which was wrong. She told me that stuff was going on at home. She and her partner split up. She no longer had the vehicle, so she was relying on public transportation to take her two boys to two different schools, to then take another bus to show up at work. And she couldn't show up on time. She was struggling. But she was, I guess, shy and reserved to just, be forthcoming with this information. And I never asked her saying, oh, it's not like you to be late. What's up? Is there anything I can do? Due process allows the accused the opportunity to defend themselves so that any disciplinary action that may or may not be put in place is for good reason. And as a result of that, on a compassionate ground, I told her, oh my gosh, like, what time do you need to start? No worries. I'll delay you by an hour. Do you need some time off? What do you need? I'll totally adjust the schedule. Because the truth is, had she told me, I was out last night and, oh, my clock wasn't working, then I'd say that's not acceptable, sorry. Okay, question. I'm being asked, what about doing a PIP? Sure. I mean, here's my first thought. You can correct me if you have a different thought. I don't know that this is so much of a performance issue as much as it is a disciplinary, only because I don't see, if I may, being prompt, on time, ready to go, a performance issue that we can work together to improve. It's just don't be late. You know what I mean? I guess I see a PIP as more so, okay, listen, like maybe we can work on your customer service skills. Maybe we can work on, I don't know, your upselling kind of techniques. So anyways, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Tell me if you think differently. I'm being asked, after the meeting, was she still your friend? Yes. And actually, we went on to continue to be girlfriends when we both left the company. So actually, I saw her a couple months ago. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Great. So there's some conversation also going on in the chat, and I love it because helping one another and also just, flexing your understanding muscles too. Okay. So what's really, really key, and I love this picture, is that we always get our ducks in a row. And our little, what are they? Little chickadees. Just like what we talked about, having effective grievance procedures. Remember that in our last lesson? We also want to make sure we have effective disciplinary procedures and having such a system. So that, first of all, people also believe in it, people will trust it, and people will respect it, so much so to follow it. So the company, back to the policy and procedure manual, P&P, I won't speak too quickly, I learned my lesson. And anywhere as well that this needs to be communicated, whether it's in the new employee handbook or otherwise, it's very important that the company really lay down the law. Let's just put all the cards on the table. This is how we approach it. This is what we deem acceptable. This is what is deemed unacceptable. Now that you've been warned, what you choose to do, that is your choice, and you need to take responsibility for it. Any type of disciplinary system as well is also going to outline as to who is responsible to administer that discipline. Is it the line manager? Does the line manager need to seek support from perhaps their supervisor and then consult with human resources? It can get pretty complicated, or it can be very straightforward and simplistic. But it's also important in terms of new management training or any management training. We want to communicate the process and what the rules are, especially as well if you feel that you've been wrongly disciplined. How might one be able to, to appeal it? I remember I was once disciplined. I'll save that story for when we talk about safety, but I was actually reprimanded for not feeling comfortable to put my safety at risk, and I appealed it. I was mortified. Anyhow, we'll put a pin in that. You're welcome. The burden of proof, remember that from Unit 2? The shifting, if you will, of the ping pong ball game. Where does it start? Who gets the ball rolling with this? We want to ensure as well that everybody is being treated fairly and consistently. Very easily, when it comes to disciplinary approaches, we might find discrimination. And discrimination has no place anywhere, including here, of course. Back to due process, we want to consider the circumstances. Sometimes, yes, we bend the rules. Yes, the rules are black and white, absolutely, but come on, right? There's so many different shades of gray. As I just said, I gave you the example of, well, I had somebody who wasn't, on time. And as an organization, and I would say as well, somebody who likes to manage a team in such a way, I'm not very tolerant with tardiness. So, and especially in that circumstance, but I could, on compassionate grounds, bend the rules, and it was justifiable. Rules and penalties associated with that, and of course, when do we get to lift any type of reprimand? So, best practice and industry standard, and even maybe some laws here or there, might say 5 to 7 years, but every organization is going to be different. So I know that when I was working at the Gap, we would, start with a clean slate, 2 years after a wrongdoing had been committed. Okay, dokie, as we bring this section to a close, that was fun. See, it gets soft, right? Like all that hard work last week, it was worth it for now, today. Page 132 all the way at the very bottom. I do need to bring back a unionized kind of scenario. Let's talk about Weingarten rights. Now, for what it's worth, I do remember seeing a very straightforward knowledge-based question about Weingarten rights on the PHR. Okay, anything is possible. Remember this. I'm just telling you about my experience. And what I do remember about the question is that while it was a straightforward knowledge-based question, I felt, anyhow, that maybe I wasn't as equipped to understand Weingarten rights enough to answer that knowledge-based question. So let me give this to you, frontwards, backwards, upside down, and inside out. And even then, it's not confusing, I promise. This right is the right that a unionized employee has to having their union rep, should they be asked by management to participate in any type of investigation. So particularly, of course, an investigatory interview. So imagine you are a unionized employee. Or maybe you're not unionized, but that is, the type of union structure. You're paying your agency fees. Be that as it may, it's a unionized environment. And there is an investigation, perhaps because there was some imminent danger reported in the workplace. And that's fine. If management is going to come to you and say, hope you don't mind, Christina, sorry, you're probably like, what? Sorry. Is going to say, Christina, I've got some questions for you. I need you to come and meet me in my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. You have the right to say, yes, I will cooperate. I'll tentatively accept your tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., however, pending availability of my union rep. When the union rep is available, you will make yourself available, and then, of course, you're going to be very forthcoming and do the best that you can. Every employee in such a scenario has the right to have their rep, and it cannot be denied. Management can't say, well, I have these questions for you, and we're going to do it right here, right now, and if your rep can't show up, too bad, so sad. No. However, the employer does not have to remind the employee that they have this right. If the employee doesn't know, or if they forget, and they don't ask for it, nobody did anything wrong here. The employer is not at fault. They just can't deny this. If an employer reminds the employee, okay, I need you, I have these questions. By the way, don't forget, Weingarten right, do you want your rep there? And the employee says, oh yeah, that's great. That's very generous. The employer does not have to remind the employee. They just can't deny it when the employee exercises it. That's what I remember seeing kind of backwards on the test that I want to be clear about. Correct. Yes. Only for union environments. Yes. Okay. Is everybody good? Maybe I made a bigger deal out of it than needed to, but I just remember seeing it on a test and I was like, okay, fantastic. Oh, and I have a question coming in. So while I read the question, please everybody feel welcome to read what you have on the slide, and then I will infiltrate your eardrums in a second. Yes, Bobby, exactly. Yeah. Which of the following is not part of an effective disciplinary system? So you're looking for the three that will make the system effective. Rule out those three. Which one is not? The rules should be communicated, yes or no. The responsibility to initiate disciplinary action should be delegated to the employee relations specialist, yes or no. The organization should have definite policies and procedures, yes or no. Employees should receive consistent treatment, yes or no. So that's very, very, but smart, like being proactive and considerate. Awesome. Guys, take a look at the comment that just came into the chat with regards to having union reps present. Sorry to shift gears. If your eyes are like, well, one thing at a time, wait. Okay. So we've got some more responses still coming in. I'm just going to wait another moment. Alrighty. Well, I haven't seen anything come in for a while, so I'll take the smart risk. Going once, going twice, 3 times. Perfect. B is correct, and everybody weighed in with that. So I guess no explanation needed. Okay, guys, fantastic. Another section is now under your belt. Just 2 questions to test your knowledge on page 133. So let's start our next section. On page 135, we start now talking about individual employment rights. Pretty good spin-off, just having talked about an employee's rights under the Weingarten, but we're going to stick to, once again, just employee relations, nothing complex in a unionized environment or anything. We're going to be introduced to the employment at will doctrine. We're going to talk about implied contracts. And let's take a look as well at, what just might lead to dismissal? Ugh, doesn't sound good. Sorry, we're going to put a little bit of a negative twist here. Employee handbooks. Aside from all the fantastic content that ought to be an employee handbook, and you read about that on page 135, it's a really good read. I'm sure you're going to probably be like, I know this. And aside from some of the best practices in terms of it should be really short and sweet so that it is effective, again, all of which is in the text, fantastic. What's key is to use the employee handbook strategically. The employee handbook is different from maybe the company's policy and procedure manual. And whether this is online or it's given, old style kind of, print copy, or perhaps both. The employee handbook is really designed really just to hit home about the important things to that new incumbent. So let me ask you guys something. If you were going to start a job tomorrow, and maybe you did just recently start a job, my question to you is this. What do you care about on your first day? What do you want to be told? What matters to you on day 1? So what do new employees, let me rephrase this. What kinds of questions might a new employee have on the first day? Perfect. Tell me about the benefits, please. Hi, where are the bathrooms? When do I get paid, please? Am I part of the current cycle, or do I have to wait like 3 weeks? What are the hours, if you will, of the work environment? What about breaks? What about lunches? What's kind of, like the acceptable norms? Do I have to pass the baton and wait for somebody? Awesome. What are the rules? or social norms. What's expected? You expect me here at 8:45 in the morning? What is the dress code? Can I wear jeans and, I don't know, a dress shirt? Parking. Is it free parking? What are the hours for parking? When am I going to get towed? Perfect. Maybe you want to be reminded about a probationary period. I would hope that that would be in the employment contract, but yeah, maybe it needs to just kind of be, readdressed or discussed or reminded. Fantastic. So aside from, of course, like I said, being clear and concise, this is a legally binding document. Employees are going to rely on this. To that respect, it also helps us understand about implied contracts. I might be getting ahead of myself. Let me actually check my slides because I think that I am. But implied contracts are really part of every single document. Employee handbook, policy procedure manual, the employment contract. It might be part of any one of those documents that we as employees might rely on. And I am getting ahead of myself. We do have a slide about that after the next one, so I'll put a pin in it. Employment at will. It's going to be a little bit of an oxymoron. But employment at will, aside from anything state specific, so again, remember we're just going, high level, industry standard, nationwide, basically says that either party, part of the employment exchange, has the right to terminate the employment relationship at any time for any reason. And again, I do know that that sounds a little bit contradictory because then there is dismissal without cause and there's lawsuits. True. But the truth is, any one of us can dismiss somebody tomorrow. Any one of us can be dismissed tomorrow. It can be as simple as, yeah, not really loving the red shoes. Grab a banker's box, there's the door. Now, I'm not saying it's right, but that's what employment at will doctrine says. But back to my point where I was just saying moments ago, in any of the documents and resources that we rely on as employees, whether it's our employment contract, the employee handbook, policy and procedure manual, there may be implied contracts. And so while an employer may be able to dismiss an employee for no reason other than maybe, I'm just not in the mood to have you around me today. If there was an implied contract, then actually we have a leg to stand on over and above probably some other lawsuits, but to really take action. So let's talk about those. Oh, we have a comment coming in. There may be some state specifics, and absolutely that is one of the exceptions. Public policy, for example, covenant of good faith, for example, in any type of unionized agreement. But just generally speaking, nationwide, no, employment at will doctrine allows an employer to terminate the relationship at any time. See, we as employees, we can terminate our relationship. The employer is not as vulnerable as we might be. So I do like to kind of take that angle. Let's talk about implied contracts. An implied contract is basically an oral, preferably a written, because when the writing's on the wall, it's in our favor, but it's a promise that an employer makes to have continued employment relationship with an employee. Now, that's a little bit subjective. It can be an indefinite kind of promise. It can be for a designated period of time kind of promise. Take this for example. Let's say it says in the employee handbook, quote, non-probationary employees will not be released except for just cause. And then maybe there's a little bit of a disclaimer that really itemizes, well, what is just cause? If you set the building on fire, if you harass, if you discriminate, if you steal, those kinds of extreme behaviors. But it doesn't say anything about performance. It doesn't say anything about tardiness, so forth. So if that's the case, I might think to myself, I'm not on probation. Even though employment at will says, I can let you go if I don't like your shoes, that's not just cause. So in that case, I relied on this promise, saying that if I don't set the building on fire, I'm not going to be dismissed. So I make it a point. I don't set the building on fire. Then why was I dismissed? That's promissory estoppel, meaning I relied on that promise. I made decisions about my future, personally, professionally, financially, based on that promise. And now, as a consequence of employment at will, I am suffering, personally, professionally, financially. So therefore, other than maybe wrongful dismissal, but definitely based on promissory estoppel, key buzzword, I'm going to go after that employer. Take, for example, the word permanent. You might think permanent employee as opposed to contract or temporary or seasonal or part-time. But unless it's defined, permanent, kind of like you think of a load-bearing wall, it permanently keeps the ceiling off the floor. You would assume that you're a permanent fixture. Again, otherwise unless for just cause. So it's very key that, first of all, a company vets all of these types of contracts, whether it is the employment contract that we sign, when somebody is hired and accepts, whether it is the employee handbook, whether it is the policy and procedure manual, whether it's any other policy statement. It needs to be vetted by legal to make sure that there are no implied contracts embedded within. Okay, coming in. Oh, okay. So look, guys, we have, that's something interesting. I think I'll do some research on that and post that to the Hive. There's a 7 test, I guess it's like a stress test for just cause. I love that. Hold on, guys. Let me just make a note to myself because I think that warrants a little bit more investigation. 7 test just cause. I'm going to find a link, more information to that, and I'm going to post that in our lesson recap. Fantastic. What is that? Oh, sorry. Fantastic. Thank you. We have a classmate saying, what is that? So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me kind of like, how we talked about the IRS 20 test, like 20-factor test. Probably it is like a stress test that there are 7, I guess, like acceptable just cause grounds for dismissal. So I guess it's, it's a test to see, okay, was that cause justifiable? Did it hit boom, 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 boom? Otherwise, maybe it's not just. Fantastic. Okay, so knowledge check question. The idea that employers can dismiss employees for good cause, for no cause, even for causes that are morally wrong, but without breaking the law is called what? Progressive discipline, just cause termination, reserved rights theory, or employment at will? Okay, perfect. Super. Okay, we'll just wait another moment. Okay. Okay, going once, going twice, 3 times. Yes, employment at will. You got to love the timing of all of this, right? Perfect. Okay, we can lock in that retention. Let's talk about retaliatory discharge. This is subject to tort liability because here, if an employee is dismissed for no reason, or for the reason being that they did something within their rights, their legal rights, such as filing a charge with OSHA, such as calling the board, for example, the NLRB. And if the employer terminates them in retaliation of that, then that is in violation of public policy. It's also called wrongful discharge or abusive discharge. Let's take a look at constructive discharge. Do I have any Seinfeld fans? I can't remember if I've asked you guys this before, but humor me. Seinfeld fans? Yeah, right? Like, did you go through the 90s and not watch Seinfeld? Okay. Well, in case anybody did not see this episode or you just need a refresher, maybe you didn't watch the series, that's cool too. There was a really, really funny episode. I can't remember the seasons, but George Costanza was working for, I forget who it was, the Yankees or Kruger. Anyhow, George Costanza, one of the main characters, was working for an employer, and he wanted to be let go. I forget if it was because of severance or he just didn't want to quit. And I had soup for dinner. Anyhow, so he wanted to be terminated. He didn't want to voluntarily resign. Anyhow, so he basically did like the bare minimum. And they didn't want to let him go. They wanted to push him out. So they wanted to create such an unpleasant work environment. So really, he hit his limit and, he would voluntarily resign. Well, he wouldn't have it. So what they did was they moved him out of his pretty nice cushiony office into a smaller space. So small that he couldn't even open the door without it hitting the desk. But he didn't budge. He still went and did his 9 to 5. He slept for most of the day, but he still did it. So really, they had nothing to complain about. And then they thought, oh, this guy isn't budging. So they moved him out of this, albeit small office, and into, I think it was like a smaller, almost like closet space or a custodian's office, something like that. But he said, I'm not budging. They're going to have to push me out. He went and still did his 9 to 5. And then, if I remember correctly, they moved his desk, so his office, if you will, literally to the lavatory, like beside a urinal. And he's like, I am not leaving. So there's be it a humorous, silly example of constructive discharge. But in the real world, of course, this is where an employer, or even if it's an employee, but by means of vicarious liability, they're representing the employer, they're making the working conditions so unbearable, so unpleasant, so poisoned, that that employee might feel that they have no other discourse but to leave. But really, they were pushed out, so it was constructive. Because it was intentional, it was delinquently planned. Okay, an illustration of constructive discharge is firing incompetent laborers, is laying off the least senior employees, terminating minority employees, or assigning unpleasant work to older workers to make them resign. Now, as you guys are responding, I'll take a look at a comment that came in that I missed. Okay, super. Okay, in the interest of time, and I think everybody has weighed in. That's the impression I'm getting. I'm sorry if I'm cutting anybody off. Yes, D is correct. So we are just knocking out these knowledge-based questions right out of the park today. Fantastic. Join me, please, over onto page 141 if you're not there yet already. And let's just take a look at some common law torts. A tort is a wrongful act or an injury that is committed willfully, negligently, in such a way to harm somebody and or their property, including as well their reputation. I'm going to give you an example. Now, it's been a while since I've actually thought about this, so forgive me. Many, many years ago, here in my wonderful lands of the province of Ontario in Canada, particularly in Toronto, we had a mayor by the name of Rob Ford. I'm not sure if anybody had ever heard of him. He was quite the joke, I'll be honest, on late night talk shows. But Rob Ford was accused of doing drugs. Later on, it did come out, it was, a justifiable accusation, but at that time, he actually sued one of the local newspapers, the Toronto Star, under common law for slander because it harmed him personally and professionally, and of course, his reputation. And his aspirations were he wanted to run for premier of the province. So anyhow, that's just an example. Mistreated employees can sue their employer in civil court based on tort law. But tort law is based on precedent-setting verdicts of the past. Now, that being said, talking about slander, defamation. I have an example. This is like through 7 degrees of separation, but it's going to speak to each of these points that you have on the slide here. Imagine this. Okay, somebody I know who knows somebody who knows somebody whose parents, dog, walker, sisters, aunts, babysitters, something like that. But story goes something like, there is a gentleman, I'm going to say somebody pretty senior, if you will, in his career, and really only worked for one company of all of his years. So with the company for about like 38 years, something like that, worked his way up the corporate ladder, if you will. He was dismissed from his organization. And it was for cause, or so it was claimed. Reason being that there was some sort of internal laundering, or for lack of a better word, shifting of funds that were against company policy. Wasn't theft, but it was some mischievous, I don't know what, fudging of the numbers. And so he was dismissed. He says that is, or he said, excuse me, that was outrageous, absolutely, ridiculous, but there was a suspicion. Again, this is maybe a faux true story, but there was the suspicion that he was being pushed out because new leadership was coming in, and they were looking for everything else, like everything under the sun, and maybe even setting him up. And a whole bunch of people in top management were released. So this person was the VP of a huge international organization, but the VP of the Canadian operations. So when he was dismissed, he demanded evidence of this, if you will, allegation. He said, I didn't do anything of the sort, and anything I did, I got approval, and I have a paper trail for the approval. Now, according to, the myth, my sources anyhow, they also said, because this guy saw it coming, he was very, very smart. He bought himself like a 2 terabyte hard drive, and he just backed everything up. Very, very smart. Anyhow, he also proved that he was harmed by the allegation. It was a slanderous, libelous statement, but he wasn't able to get another job. So here, and you can imagine, right? Put one and one together, I guess. You have somebody who's been working for a company for 38 years, is in such a high position, being the VP of a country. Yeah, they're probably also, first of all, peaking maybe retirement. Definitely maybe not in the peak years, because we talked about Erik Erikson's, career stages in Unit 3. Hard enough, probably, I imagine, to secure work, let alone, I guess, work in a small industry where people talk. And then as well, he had to prove that there was no legitimate business reason for them to claim this, because again, it goes back to there is no evidence of what you're accusing me of having done. This is very, very key, because there was a wrongful dismissal suit and a defamation suit and an implied contract suit. I think this person, from what I heard, sued for everything and then some. And no joke, walked away with a nice 8 digits. But in such a defamation suit, all of these things would need to be proven. Okay, I told you, today's story time. Non-compete agreements. So Facebook recently, at least that I know of, Facebook recently, for example, just released a new product and service called Portal, if I'm getting it right. Can you imagine how many cajillions of years ago, be it the acquisition of the software, let alone the hardware, and or the development of it? I don't really know the history of it, so I'm making some stuff up. But no doubt this was not an overnight wonder. So there's been a lot of development going on to create this new product or service. And I want you to think about maybe even your organization. Think about the computer that you're using. I bet that company, HP, Apple, Sony, Dell, whatever you're using, they probably didn't want all of their secret trade information of their hardware or software or pricing structure to leak. So it's not uncommon for employers to have all employees and or vendors and or stakeholders to sign non-compete agreements. I mean, celebrities do it. You can't go to a celebrity wedding without them signing, non-disclosure, an NDA, NDL, whatever it's called. So any employer who's concerned about employees really leaking any type of information and critical resources, they might have the employee sign such a restrictive covenant, that being, of course, a non-compete agreement, really to protect the business's best interests. In order for such a non-disclosure to uphold in court, should it ever be an issue, there are 4 criteria that have to be met. First and foremost, what the company is trying to lock in has to be proven to not be generally known in the trade, and definitely something that you can't easily get your hands on. As well, the company would have to prove that everything being developed, for which they want to keep as trade secret, is being developed at the employer's expense. As well, that it gives the company competitive advantage, therefore it being leaked, it has been a tremendous hit or loss, and that the employer did everything that they could to keep all this information of the utmost, whatever, confidentiality. And it's legit to have employees sign an NDA. Ah, there it is, NDA, so you came to me. Okay, let's wrap up this section. In order to prove a case of defamation, so slander, an employee must present all except which of the following as evidence: that there is no legitimate business reason for the statement to be made. Others believe the statement to be true. A false or malicious statement was made to another person. The person was harmed by the statement. 3 of these we'd want to have in our pocket. 1 of them, not so much. Okay. Okay, we are almost there, guys. So let's get a little bit closer to getting there. And I'll announce the answer. B is correct. Amazing. And this is also why, just another reason, I guess, why I also reference checks. Anything more other than, just maybe stating the facts, like confirming dates of employment or the position or major responsibilities. That's why they're dangerous. Page 145, we complete this section. 3 questions to test your knowledge. Let's take a look at workforce behavior problems. There's a lot, some of which can be really, really intense and extreme, and some are a little bit innocent. Come on, why are you making such a big deal of it? So let's identify some workforce behavior problems, but also what kind of an impact that they have. So here we have an image of somebody who is really just teed off, or someone who sees a really, really big spider and wants to get rid of it. There's a whole variety of different types of problems that we may experience at work. They can be verbal, they can be emotional, they can be a little bit more, I want to say, like physical. Understanding the causes or the problems is key, because while we cannot take on playing armchair psychologist, at least that's my opinion, if I may, I personally don't feel equipped or knowledgeable or trained. But we, from a human resources perspective, as the employee champion, as a catalyst, as the ambassador, we need to try to understand how to react to it, keeping, of course, the environment, the employees, the property safe. So you see here a list of a couple of types of problems. Again, if we can identify it, great, without accusing or pointing fingers, but providing support and providing help. Here's a problem that might exist, that being absenteeism and turnover. So aside from the equation of absenteeism, which I don't think, truthfully, that you're going to need to know, I don't think that you're going to be tested on how do you measure absenteeism or turnover, although we have discussed turnover before. I think that the elements is pretty self-explanatory. Let's talk about the categories of absenteeism. So I'm not really going to even focus on turnover so much. So that being said, there's planned absences. These are scheduled, these are approved, such as you may have requested Wednesday off, Friday off, Monday off, what have you. Nothing really to be alarmed by, to be honest with you. There are unplanned or incidental absences. People get sick, I hope not, but look, it happens. We get a cold, we're out for 2 or 3 days. Sometimes we have to provide a doctor's note. Again, unless there is a pattern or a high volume, it's nothing terribly alarming. Extended absences, these are measured by more than 1 week. Some people go on sabbaticals. Sometimes they go on short-term disability, long-term disability. We talk about that a little bit deeper into when we talk about health. This is what's concerning. Intermittent absences. Intermittent absences can actually lead a little bit more to a bigger behavior problem. And I'm going to give you, again, another example. A long time ago, there it is again, but I can't help it. Some time ago, before I actually joined HR.com, I was working part-time in a not-for-profit company. And I was actually working, funnily enough, nothing to do with people. In fact, just the opposite, in an area that I don't love. It was like Excel spreadsheets and finance and what have you. Anyhow, my manager, who was the accounting manager, would every week, once a week, without fail, have a standing meeting to meet with our director. Now, this is a very, very small environment, maybe 6 people on the team, if that. And I was so glad I basically got to hide behind my manager, because the director, she was just wretched. Like, she's like, sorry, but she wasn't human. She was abrasive, aggressive, vulgar, anything that would make your teeth sweat, you know, being in HR, and I would say being human. In any event. So I never really picked up on it, but every week after this, like, I guess, you know, catch up and review, my manager wouldn't come back to work, or kind of come back and sit at her desk and kind of continue to pound away at the computer. She had to go to the bathroom and she'd be gone for half an hour, or she'd sometimes come in and say, you know what, I'm going to take an early lunch, and then she wouldn't come back for 2.5 hours. Sometimes she would say, oh, you know, my daughter called me, I've got to bring her the car, and I'm going to take off the afternoon. It varied, and I didn't make anything of it. It wasn't my business. Until one day, and we're going like months after, I guess, you know, after these meetings, one day, my manager comes out of the meeting with the director, and she's pale like a ghost. I was like, okay, it's not my place to judge. Maybe it's age, fine. Maybe it's, you know, she's hungry. I don't know. Maybe she's dealing with some other stress. Again, I don't know. I'm just come in and work part-time. I don't know everything. And she just collapsed. And so we called the ambulance and what have you, and thank goodness it was a panic attack. It wasn't what we thought it was, you know, worser, such as like a stroke or a heart attack. Panic attack was bad enough. But all of these intermittent absences, whether it was gone for a half an hour, took lunch for 2 hours, took off the afternoon, and then led till ultimately, you know, being hospitalized and treated, and she was off for about 2.5 weeks. These intermittent absences was just an indication of a larger workforce behavior problem. It was a behavior problem by the director, because she was swearing, she was threatening. Like I said, as HR people, guys, you get chills in your spine if I were to repeat the things that I had heard. So sometimes absences and even turnover, yes, they're larger red flags, but in particular, intermittent absences, because true to their name, intermittent, just like your intermittent windshield wipers on your, you know, in your car, there may or may not be a static pattern. Anyhow, I was happy to leave that environment. And the lady who I'm still in touch with, she was like my work mom. She is doing well, and she too left. So anyhow, drug and alcohol use. Of course, this is a workforce behavior problem. It may not necessarily be taking place at work. And I know that different states and different environments, they do allow, for example, cannabis or not. And if they haven't yet, it's a coming your way, says the girl from Ontario, where it is permissible. But the point is that be it legal or illegal substances, they may be problematic. Here's a fact for you. 25% of an alcoholic's annual income is paid for work not actually performed. It's a terrible disease. So these kinds of, if you will, struggles lead to increased absenteeism, increased tardiness, increased accidents at work, decreased productivity. This is a problem. Again, it may not be taking place in the work environment, but it has an impact. Yeah, it was just a fun fact. I'll repeat it. 25% of an alcoholic's income is paid for work that's not performed. So basically, this person isn't doing anything because I guess, you know, maybe they are struggling with the disease and they're not maybe maximizing their output. Oops, sorry, I went back. My bad. Sexual harassment. Okay, we know that this is a big no-no. We know that it is against the law. We know that it is prohibited. We know some states, for example, California, more so than others, have like very, very, very tight laws in place, but be that as it may, let's just visit what it means. Any unwelcome kind of sexual advance, request for sexual favor in lieu of, if you will, any type of verbal or physical conduct, absolutely, positively, without a doubt, unacceptable, zero tolerance, immediate dismissal. So let's just take a look. How too might sexual harassment actually, I guess, you know, rear its ugly face? By submitting to any conduct that is made either explicitly or implicitly as a term of employment might be considered sexual harassment. Submitting or rejecting an individual on the basis of like an employment decision might too be sexual harassment. And any conduct for the purpose of, or I should say in a way to, you know, intimidate or to create hostile environment or offensive working environment to, you know, almost like deliver as a consequence for not having submitted to a sexual harassment. Okay, you know what, I'm being asked to say it again. Okay, let me say it in plainer terms. I'm sorry. I have to admit, kind of relying on my notes and let me rely on my brain, which, okay, warning, I'm relying on my brain. If somebody is making a condition of employment reliant on anything of a sexual nature, whether it is explicit or it is implicit, so either straight out, may I, Bill Clinton-ish, or it's kind of read between the lines, that's sexual harassment. So condition of employment. If any type of employment decision, such as, well, you know, come up into my room tonight and you can go to the training session tomorrow, or, you know what, you can go on the business trip to Vegas. And it's on the basis, again, of a sexual favor of any kind, that would be considered sexual harassment. And if somebody is going to use, if you will, how do I say it, like a sexual presence or, you know, to intimidate somebody or to create for an offensive work environment, it's going to interfere with their work performance as a result of, again, may be considered sexual harassment. Is that, sorry, I get very nervous around this topic, so it's not one of the fluffier fun things like recruitment that I enjoy. Very good, yeah, definitely entertainment industry. Harvey Weinstein much? Yeah, absolutely. If you're lucky, it is, Bobby. Okay, let's talk about employer liability. So here, basically, we see the EEOC come back. And the EEOC says, listen, employer as a company, this huge monstrosity, I get it, you don't know what every single one of your employees is saying and doing and what's happening, be it in the workplace, let alone what's happening, you know, off the clock, off of, you know, company property. But by means of vicarious liability, the employer is completely on the hook. That's basically, you know, what we're seeing here. Okay, let's wrap up this section and just one more to go and then you guys are done. An employee with alcohol problems should be what? Fired immediately, treated with a lot of patience and understanding, required to accept help to keep their jobs if their performance problems are documented, or left alone to handle their own personal problems. Now remember, alcoholism is seen as a disease. It is, in other words, if I may, a handicap. And just like anybody else with a physical disability would be given compassionate accommodations. Okay, very good. Forgive me if I'm cutting off your thoughts, but in the interest of time, C is correct. Perfect. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw everybody weigh in with C, so amazing. Alrighty, guys. So while we have, what, 5, 6 minutes remaining, stick with me. Let's do the last section. So this way we're going to reach our goal tonight. On page 161, we do complete this section, 4 questions to test your knowledge. Let's take a look at organizational exit. We're going to take a look more so at the angle of when one is exiting really not by choice. In other words, they are dismissed. But keep in mind, though, organizational exit can be both voluntary and involuntary. So it can be pretty subjective. Oh, yikes. Doesn't sound good. So let's take a look at how to handle this. And then we're going to be introduced to WARN. This is another piece of legislation. So get out that list just when you thought it was done. Terminations aren't pleasant. Again, whether it's involuntary or voluntary, when it is involuntary, they're traumatic. They're not easy to administer. They're not easy to hear the situation. Here are the things. It's very important for us from an HR perspective, and so should you see any kind of scenario-based question, of course, you're always taking on the role of being the HR ambassador, right? We need to make sure that the termination that is either being requested or has been had was for job-related reasons. We want to make sure as well that the termination is as a result of a specific incident, is properly investigated, is properly documented. It's not an impulsive, get out. Okay, we know that we have the at-will doctrine, but we also know that there could be a whole bunch of civil lawsuits following. We want to make sure that if this was performance-related, the person knows that what they did was unacceptable. I'd like to see those performance evaluations. I'd like to see those performance improvement plans. I'd like to see those corrective action kind of, signed off understandings. We want to as well make sure that the termination is consistent with anybody else's previous treatment to an identical, if not very, very similar like situation. We don't want there to be any disparate treatment. Remember that from Unit 2? We as well want to review the employee's overall work record and make sure that the employee has received all the rights in which we as a company or as a locality or as a state or as a country entitle them to. And then last but not least, make sure that the individual who's being dismissed is not a victim of, be it retaliation or frankly anything else. So this is kind of a funny word, termination interview. It's not really an interview. We think of interview and that's a good thing. This is not a good thing. But the interview conversation or interview can be very traumatic. It's not pleasant, I would say, for either person. Of course, certainly not the person who unfortunately may be being dismissed. It may not be necessarily for bad reasons. It may be a layoff, but it is what it is. Question for you guys, actually, before I continue to ramble off. What day of the week and or time of the day do you think, or perhaps know for certain, is recommended for termination? What day of the week and or time of the day? Okay, so we got Fridays, Friday afternoon, okay? Monday, Friday, end of the shift, Friday. I think I missed a Monday in there, but okay, I'm seeing some consistency. So you guys like Mondays and Fridays. Okay. End of day. Okay. So, oh, we have someone saying not a Friday. Okay. There is no right nor wrong answer. There's some logic, I think, to why a company or a manager may do it a certain way. But the truth is, there's no good day ever to be let go. Now, some studies I have read and I have been told, but some studies would say, you know what, Friday is best because the individual, maybe who's being dismissed, then in a typical office environment that is, so let me paint that picture. The person who's being dismissed won't really feel, if you will, like the cold water kind of feeling. They won't feel the shock value the next day, because really what would be happening the next day anyways, they'd be sleeping in, going for a jog, like whatever their Saturday and Sunday kind of routine is. It won't really hit them for a couple of days, and by that time, hopefully it's kind of settled in. Other reports will say, no, never do it on a Friday. You want to do it on any weekday other than Friday, so that the individual can start to take action immediately. Contact their unemployment office, contact a lawyer, contact a recruiter. So there's definitely pros and cons, I would say, to anything and everything. Time of day, again, pros and cons with anything. Maybe you want to dismiss them at the end of the day. They were on their way out anyways. It'll hurt for the rest of the day if they're thinking, I was just at work an hour ago and I thought I was going to go for lunch with my buddy, but it looks like instead I'm going to the unemployment office. But at the same token, sometimes it's recommended do it first thing in the morning, maybe calling the individual. They'll get clued in to why were they called for an 8 a.m. meeting if really the environment starts at 9 a.m. But, respect their humiliation. Let them leave without everybody, being there to watch them kind of walk down like the path of shame, so to speak. Again, best practices, I don't know that anybody has like the secret antidote. Here's the thing. Here are the guidelines, as you can see. Plan for that conversation. Prepare for it. Prepare for what the person needs to hear, what the person needs to sign, what you need to say, what you don't want to say. It is not easy. Be very direct. Describe the situation that led up to it. Hopefully, the person will not be caught off guard terribly anyhow. That person might have questions, including such as, what's your company lawyer's name and phone number? But be prepared. Probably can't hurt to have a list of major contacts, such as, here's the unemployment office, here's the lawyer's number, here's the EAP number. Severance package should be explained, should there be one, and of course have all necessary documents signed off. If there are layoffs, reduction in forces, again, not pleasant, but might not be a terrible, terribly catching somebody off guard. But again, what you want to do is you want to prepare any instructions for managers. So the managers might actually be the ones having the conversation, not necessarily HR. Just like we needed to train people on how to do performance evaluations or train people on how to have, a structure-based interview, we probably have to train people on how to have these really unpleasant conversations. Separation letters. Oh, here's another story for you. So when I was working at the Bata Shoe Company, the VP of HR, unfortunately, warned everybody in the company over the next couple of months, we're going to be rolling off some layoffs, so we're really, really sorry about it, but just, be warned, business isn't good and it is what it is. The VP of HR, I remember because I saw it in my peripheral vision. She came out of her office. The rest of us were working in a really large, big open space. Let's call it one massive cubicle. She went to her assistant and very quietly gave the assistant what turns out to be a list of names and departments to prepare separation letters. Not pleasant. All of a sudden, the HR assistant started crying. And so I looked over and, I looked at people closer to me because I was a little bit far from her. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? Did she just get a bad phone call? Did she just get a bad email? I hope everybody's okay. My first instinct is, oh my God, she just got bad news. God forbid somebody was in a car accident. So one of my other coworkers, friends, whatever, go over to her and they ask her, oh my God, Leslie, what's wrong? She says, my name is on the list. I have to prepare my own separation letter. I couldn't make this guys up. I couldn't make this up if I wanted to. Isn't that brutal? Anyhow, be prepared for having questions, having those answers. And again, in preparation of training managers, it probably can't hurt to have the commonly asked questions like in a Q&A. Contact list of phone numbers, like I mentioned moments ago, but too as well for that manager, frankly, for anybody, there should be an exit checklist. Just make sure, you crossed every T and dotted every I. We're almost done, and I'm going to take a look at these comments that have been coming in. So thanks, guys, for your patience. This is our last slide. WARN, Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. Remember, we're talking here about layoffs and about RIFs. This act requires that any company with 100 or more employees on staff in any one given location, there may be multiple locations, that they give those employees at least 60 days advance notice if that location is closing. Okay, there's more stipulations below for your eyes and your ears, but that's the key. And what I really want to stress is, you may have a manufacturer that has multiple different warehouses. This is relative to each location. Okay, so as I take a look at the comments that are waiting for me, the Worker Adjustment, Retraining, and Notification Act requires employers to what? I'll let you read this. of you. I want a taco. So thanks for sticking with me these extra 5 minutes. I realize if I wasn't a bumbling buffoon today, I probably could have saved you those 5 minutes. Let me announce the answer and let me comment on a couple of the comments that came in. Correct answer is C. So you have now completed, I want to say you have now completed Unit 5. I know you haven't, but let me explain to you why you have. You have now completed all the employee and labor relations stuff. Pages 171 to, 167 or so, everything else, which is a nice thick handful of pages, makes up what used to be a sixth body of knowledge. That sixth body of knowledge was and still continues to be a very, 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 very small sliver, if anything, on the exam. I'll be surprised if you have 3 or 4 questions. We're still going to go through it. I'm going to give it the TLC that it deserves, but all the heavy lifting is done. So I almost want to quasi-celebrate with you that you have done all of the learning of the course. All that is next is we're going to talk about health, safety, and security. OSHA, EAPs, employee wellness, vulnerability analysis, what to do in case of a catastrophe. But I'll be honest with you guys, you can go into the holiday knowing you're pretty much done. So on that note, if anybody, I'm going to take a look at the comments that came in. I'm still not, I'm not done with you guys, but if you need to go, then feel welcome to sign out. I want to wish you a very, very happy and healthy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys enjoy. I hope you get a moment to be with friends and family. Be safe. Enjoy, as I said, rest, relax. If you can make it productive, that's awesome. If not, you deserve the downtime. So all the best. Okay, let me take a look. Let me just scroll. Hold on. Almost there. You had to fire your best friend, then we went to my house and drank beer and ate taco. Oh, right. I love that. I saw that one. I wanted taco. You just realized I'm hungry. I'd never terminate anyone that didn't know it wasn't coming. That is super nice. I can only wish that everybody, first of all, do that and be able to do that. And then if it has to be done to them, then they should only be terminated by you because you're so nice about it. I'm being asked, did she still do it? So I think that question came in when I was talking about preparing your own separation letter. She did. She's a very, very ethical person. She did. Oh, but believe you me, though, it wasn't easy, and I think that she did it with quite a bit of sass. You had to riff your brother? Oh, man. That can't be easy. Are you having Thanksgiving with your brother in a couple of days? I'm just kidding. Wow, yeah, that can't be easy. I guess it's hard to mix business with pleasure if and or when it's mixed. Like nepotism is all great when it's working out well, right? Okay. I'm being asked, when are our practice tests due in order to qualify for the money back guarantee? Good question. Any test scores that are earned from the day that you had enrolled leading up to the day before you test, provided, again, you're testing within that 3-month time period, all those will be counted. Don't stress. It doesn't have to be done by next week or anything like that. In fact, I don't want anyone to stop doing practice tests anytime soon. So your money back guarantee is intact until March the 8th. Please continue to rock out those practice tests leading up to your exam day. Sorry, let me just respond. Guys, bear with me. I'm going to go silent for a moment. Just so I can respond to a classmate. Forgive me. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, January, exciting. Good. So you're going to have a really nice, I would say, break to do some independent studies. And as well, though, let me just mention, stay on track, because with the holidays, it's so easy to be like, tomorrow. Or I'm going to go over to my friend's house and have a glass or 4 of wine, tomorrow. So whatever you do, just stay your best police person. Okay, yeah, for sure. Oh, wow, December 16th, that's coming up. Exciting, exciting. Okay, awesome, guys. All righty. Well, I'm going to stay online for a moment. To my classmate who wants to chat, stay on the call. Yeah, I saw. Yeah, just stay on the call. If anybody has any questions, I'm still here. But otherwise, I might start kicking some of y'all out. So feel welcome. If you do have a question, otherwise, go and enjoy your holiday. Okay, I don't see anything coming in. I hope I'm not cutting anybody off. I am going to start. That's a really good question. Yeah. No. Yeah. No. I want to say page 171 to 200 at minimum. Next week. We're finishing this next week. 110,000%. I will not be running classes, including review. I think I'm going to push it to Sunday, March the 8th. Sunday, December the 8th. Okay. Forgive me, guys. I am going to electronically dismiss you guys from the call. And let me know if you have any questions. So if you are dismissed, don't be caught off, okay? And let me actually just stop recording.